I thought it was time for me to pull over and actually give a slightly more in-depth review of the little 310 BMW, because we've done 240 odd miles now and I've got a reasonable impression for pretty much all of it. And we'll start in the middle with the engine. Single cylinder, 34 horsepower area, I think they're claiming for it. And if I'm honest, it actually feels better than that, because it might not make big horsepower figures peak because it only revs to 10,000, but it makes good torque. So from anything from about 3,500 RPM upwards, it pretty much has the same shove to it. So it may only be 34 horsepower peak, but it's actually quite torquey. So basically, once you're past about 34, 35 mile an hour, you can put it in top gear, and then it doesn't really matter if you're dancing on the gearbox or if you just leave it in top and roll it on. It makes pretty much the same forward progress. So that is actually quite impressive. It would be slightly more fun if it was a bit more revvy, but to actually go somewhere, it's actually really quite good. The slight oddity of it having such a wide torque range is that they've geared it really, really short. So sat at sort of 70, 75 mile an hour, it's doing 7,000 to 8,000 RPM, and it's getting quite buzzy because it only revs to 10. And it could, I suspect, pull the same speed at considerably lower RPM. And it does mean that anything over about 34, 35 mile an hour, you want to be in top gear, because otherwise it's a bit buzzy. Fifth gear, 30 mile an hour is perfect. The first four gears basically just get you up to 30 mile an hour, and so you pretty much let the clutch out and at walking speed hook second, then third, then fourth, and off you go. So I think it could easily have a taller gearing in it, or that you could put a taller final drive on it. It would actually make it more usable. But to be fair, you put it in top gear, you roll it on everywhere, it is actually surprisingly good. So the engine, from me, gets a thumbs up. The brakes, on the other hand, aren't particularly inspiring. These are not Brembos, they're Beemer onto solid discs, and because the bike's not especially heavy, it stops pretty well. It has plenty of braking power, but there is a lot of movement in the lever before you actually get anything to happen. So as you're feeding through traffic or anything, or if you're riding slowly and want lots of feel, you haven't really got it. It's sort of nothing, 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 quite a lot of bite. So the lever travel isn't very good. The rear basically does the same. You've got loads and loads of play in everything, as you can see there, and then it just goes on and basically wants to stop straight away. So I'm not terribly impressed with how easy the brakes are to use. And this is bearing in mind that this is a bike for easy use. Right, on to the suspension. Comfort is obviously the main priority because everything is soft. It's soft and there's not a great deal of damping. So it is very comfortable over the bumps, and if you hit sort of sharp edges or roadwork, ramps and stuff like that, no bother at all. Floats over them, no problem. The only problem really with the suspension is if you try and do anything a bit more sporty, it moves quite a lot and it wallows a bit and it's just a bit uninspiring. So you kind of don't know how far you can lean the bike and how quickly you can enter corners because there's not a lot of feel from the tyres. So definitely more about comfort than about sport. In fact, the only thing that I think the sport badge relates to is the writing on the tank. It's quite a sporty paint job, but nothing on the bike other than that screams sporty at me at all. Right, throttle, nice and light, nice and easy to use as you would expect, but it's very long. And so if you are sat on the interstate or on the motorway, as we rightly call them, because you've got pretty much wide open throttle or quite close to it a lot of the time, you do end up rearranging your wrist so you're further round to begin with. So the throttle is a bit longer than I would like, brake lever travel is a bit longer than I like, and the clutch bite is almost all the way out, which feels like the clutch is knackered in it, but the bike's done 1,500 mile, so it isn't, it just bites right near the end. So actually with my big hands it's fine. Got little hands, you'll be adjusting your clutch quite a bit. Right, footrest and riding position. The seat is low. If you have little legs, this bike is going to fit you pretty easily. The seat's actually got plenty of padding in it and it's really quite comfortable. So from a comfort point of view, you could sit on that bike, on that seat for quite a long time. As I said, I've done 240, nearly 250 miles today. Absolutely no issue with comfort. At motorway speeds, the pegs are a bit vibey, but the rest of the time they're not bad at all. The vibes also continue to the mirrors. Anything over 60 mile an hour, you can see what's behind you, but it is quite blurry. Below that, they're absolutely fine, but there doesn't seem to be much vibration within the handlebars. So it's obviously high enough frequency that it makes the mirrors go blurry, but I haven't had any issue with tingly fingers or anything like that today. Petrol tank, it's a tank that holds petrol. 150-ish miles to tank range sounds about right. I've filled up once today and I've still got half a tank left, so probably a bit over 150 miles to a tank. It's been telling me on the dashboard about an average of about 60 miles to the gallon, so it is relatively cheap motoring. If I come round the other side, the last thing really is gear lever, which wobbles around quite a lot. It needs quite a positive engagement. It needs to be relatively firm, and I have had it once where I pulled up, it told me it was in neutral, it wasn't. I let the clutch out and installed it, looking like an amateur. So the gearboxes, again, ratios are too close together, have to be quite positive with it. So that's not got a full thumbs up, but it's perfectly passable. So that is about it for the little 310 BMW. It's not the most inspiring thing to ride, but to be fair to it, it is actually perfectly capable of spending an entire day in the saddle. If you were commuting on it, it would be absolutely ideal. And so really, it's quite a good bike. Admittedly, I'm not going to rush out and buy one, but if I had a day to spend on a bike and didn't want to break myself financially with petrol money, I might well plump for another of these, because it has been easy to ride.